Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're digging into a pretty fascinating analysis that went viral. It presents this really stark contrast. On one hand, you've got global headlines and huge movements on college campuses, and on the other, almost total media silence. So the analysis asks a pretty tough question. Is this just a coincidence, or is it actually by design?
And look, the analysis we're breaking down today, it's not just some abstract philosophical question. It gets right into it by using two major simultaneous global events to build its case: the Palestinian cause and the massive anti-regime protests happening in Iran.
Okay, so let's dive right into the heart of the argument. First up, the analysis sets the scene with a situation that it claims is being almost completely ignored by the world.
So the source zooms in on Iran, right? A nation of over 90 million people, and it's in the middle of these huge anti-regime protests. But here's the critical point it makes. The government often hits back with a near-total internet blackout. That creates this information vacuum, and it basically silences the protesters' voices on the world stage.
And this, right here, is where the analysis really drops the hammer, with its central comparison. On the left side, it points to the super visible, really loud support for the Palestinian cause on Western campuses. But then you look at the right, for Iran, and it describes a totally different world. Just silence. No trending hashtags, no big solidarity statements. According to the source, it's a silence that is absolutely deafening.
Now, the source material argues this is not just some accident, right? Not an oversight. It makes a really bold claim that this silence is actually a deliberate choice. And it's a choice driven less by a universal idea of human rights and more by a very specific ideological loyalty.
Okay, so what is this ideological framework the analysis keeps talking about? Let's, really break down the core argument here.
The whole point here, this central claim, is that what's actually happening in Iran, it just doesn't compute. It's totally incompatible with a narrative, a story, that some Western activists have already built for themselves. It would shatter their whole framework.
And at the absolute core of this framework, according to the source, is something it calls the oppressor-oppressed dichotomy. Basically, it's a worldview that tries to simplify every single conflict on the globe into this neat little box: a powerful oppressor on one side and a marginalized oppressed group on the other.
And this is really where it all clicks into place. The source argues that the situation in Iran completely breaks the programming of this worldview. And you might ask why? Well, it's because here you have protesters rising up against a theocratic Islamic regime. This casts an Islamic power as the oppressor, and that's a scenario that just doesn't fit into that simple oppressor-oppressed narrative the source identified. It creates a short circuit. Now, just to be super clear, the source lays out both of these perspectives. Viewpoint A sees an oppressive religious state that's funding groups like Hamas, but Viewpoint B sees the Free Iran movement itself as some kind of Western Islamophobic project. So you have this fundamental disagreement on who the good guys and bad guys even are.
But the analysis doesn't just stop with activists on the ground. No, it pivots and takes a hard look at how this same ideological lens might be shaping the way the mainstream media tells the whole story.
And for its case study, the source really puts a specific BBC report under the microscope. The critique isn't just about what was said, but more importantly, about what was left out. The source calls it a lie by omission. And according to the source, these aren't just, minor edits. The argument is that by leaving out the word Islamic, by framing the protests as being only about money, and by totally ignoring the calls for democracy and the chanting for the exiled prince, the report fundamentally changes the story. It essentially strips the protests of all their political and religious meaning.
And this quote, man, it really captures the source's final verdict on the media's role. It's a heavy accusation that the goal has shifted from just reporting the facts to actively shaping a narrative that fits into a pre-existing worldview. But look, the analysis isn't just about pointing out the problem of silence in media framing. It also shines a light on a potential solution, and it presents a really clear alternative vision for what Iran's future could look like.
So the source brings this figure into the spotlight: exiled Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi. He's presented as the very embodiment of the story that's being ignored. It highlights his detailed, forward-looking plan for a democratic Iran, a plan from a leader whose name, the source points out, is being chanted by protesters in the streets. And here it is, the roadmap. It's a three-step plan that's presented as a really clear alternative. Step 1, liberation. That means supporting the people in their fight to overthrow the current regime. Then, the really crucial second step, a stable transition. This is all about preventing the chaos of a power vacuum. You'd form a transitional government to keep citizens safe and get the economy back on its feet. And finally, the endgame, free elections, watched over by the international community to let the Iranian people actually democratically choose their own future.
So in the interview, Pahlavi makes it super clear. He's not trying to be a king again, restoring the monarchy. He sees himself more as a facilitator, an honest arbiter, whose only job is to unite people and guide the country toward a democratic process that the people themselves choose.
Okay, so we've walked through this entire analysis, from the silence on college campuses to the specific words used or not used in the media. So what's the big takeaway here? What are we left with?
And maybe the bigger question, the one that really sticks with you, is what's the real-world cost of that silence?